Dillard's is a department store chain mostly found in the southern half of the United States. Its headquarters is in Arkansas, much like Walmart, but their biggest presence is in Texas and Florida, combining for almost 100 of their 270 locations. For anyone living outside of those areas unfamiliar with Dillard's, I would say it is a lot like Macy's. They specialize in apparel and accessories for middle to upper scale customers. In fact, in the 1990s, following Macy's bankruptcy, there were reports that Dillard's might be looking to acquire them, but it never ended up happening. Overall, I think you would agree that most of these traditional department stores have not been doing well. Viewers of this channel probably understand that better than most, considering I've made videos about the decline of Sears, JCPenney, and even Macy's, three of the most iconic names in the industry. So, you might be surprised to learn that Dillard's, a highly comparable alternative to those, has been doing extremely well. The most striking way that I can support that is the fact that their stock price has risen about 750% over the past 5 years, making it one of the best investments you could have made over that time. It is currently worth over $10 billion. There are very few major companies out there that have had a higher return, and remember, we are talking about an old-fashioned department store. Almost hard to believe, right? That is what sparked my interest in this topic. There's a lot of unique stuff when it comes to Dillard's, so for this video, I want to talk about what makes them stand out while identifying what I believe to be 5 of the biggest reasons behind its success. Starting out with something that may seem a little counterintuitive, but Dillard's is very traditional. When you walk into one of the stores, you might feel like you have been transported back in time. Just the overall layout and appearance of everything will give you that classic feeling. In the 1960s, they started opening locations as anchors to shopping malls, and to this day, even as many malls have struggled and most of their competitors have shifted away from that strategy, Dillard's has stuck with it. In 2025, they even partnered with a developer to buy a mall in Texas. And I know that all of this might sound like a terrible strategy that can fall apart down the line, which might be the case, but for now anyway, they are doing a great job at making it work. Dillard's has been gradually closing stores going back to the 1990s, so I have to believe that the ones remaining are the most efficient and located in some of the healthiest malls. As you might expect from a retailer of middle to higher end merchandise, their customer base is a bit older, so many of them remember and appreciate the traditional format and are more likely to go to a physical store as opposed to shopping over the internet. Plus, the very fact that so many competing stores of this format have shut down means that Dillard's is one of the few options remaining for anyone seeking it out. There is something to respect about the fact that they know who they are and they're sticking with it. Even if department stores and malls were to become extinct, my bet is that Dillard's would be the last one to fall. My next reason behind their success is going to be tight control. Dillard's is named after its founder, William Dillard. In 1938, shortly after graduating from Columbia University School of Business and completing a management training course from Sears, he borrowed $8,000 from his father to open a store near his hometown in Nashville, Arkansas. He continued to lead that company for, believe it or not, the next 60 years.
Today, there are Dillards across the land, but you know what? Mr. Dillard still runs them with integrity.
And when he finally retired in 1998, his son William Dillard II took over and has been running it ever since. I mean, that is pretty remarkable, to be 88 years into a business with only 2 different CEOs. And the rest of the Dillard family has been heavily involved as well. Each year in their annual report, they list all the executive officers and go out of their way to list their relation to William Dillard II. And that list includes 4 siblings, 2 nieces, and his son William Dillard III. When Dillard's became a public company in 1969, they issued 2 classes of stock, and Class B, the one with the voting rights, remains under the family's control. It allows them to operate it very much like a private company that does not have to worry too much about the pressure from outside investors. The Dillard family are the ones calling the shots, and they do make a lot of decisions that probably would not be possible otherwise. Likely because they have so much history and pride connected to the business, they are extremely careful and conservative with their approach, which is going to be the next reason behind their success. In their 2018 letter to shareholders, William Dillard II wrote, "We believe our conservative fiscal policy, currently evidenced by our fortress balance sheet, enabled us to survive while others have failed." I guess it comes down to your definition of success, because playing it safe is probably the #1 reason Dillard's is so strong and stable right now, but it is also the #1 reason that Dillard's has never been as large as Macy's and remained constricted to about half of the country. After about a decade of operating that initial store, William Dillard sold it and used that money to buy a 40% controlling interest in a larger store in Texarkana. And from that point, most of their expansion has been through relatively small acquisitions made possible through manageable loans. One that stands out to me would be in 1985. They bought 12 stores from Macy's for about $100 million. Macy's management was trying to raise money to fund a leveraged buyout, so they were willing to make the deal, and that is a good representation of a typical Dillard's acquisition. They would wait until an opportunity presents itself with a company that is struggling or in need of money in some way, and use that desperation to negotiate a favorable deal. Also, I think it is interesting that they bought Higbee's, a chain of 12 stores in Ohio that I recognize as the store from A Christmas Story, you know, the place where he sees that terrifying Santa Claus. By far, their biggest and most aggressive acquisition was in 1998, when they bought a chain of around 100 stores for $2.9 billion. Really the only deal that does not fit in with their slow and steady approach. It raised their long-term debt to over $3 billion that they have been consistently reducing ever since. Today, they have very little debt, a lot of cash on hand, and own about 90% of their stores, along with more than 3 million square feet of distribution and fulfillment centers. They could be using these resources to try and expand the business, like most other companies would likely be doing in that position, but there are no shareholders pressuring them to do it, and the Dillard family really seems to value stability over growth. So debatable if you can consider this a reason behind their success, but you can see the argument for it. Next up on the list, going back to the stores themselves, Dillard's has created a pleasant experience. More of a subjective reason, I will admit, but the stores are known for being clean and organized, the displays have been praised, the lines are never too long, and a lot of it stems from the employees, 70% of which are full-time and eligible to participate in the stock ownership plan after working there for a year, giving them more of a personal connection to the stores. They have also avoided discounts and sales and clearance items. In fact, 28 of their stores are specifically dedicated to selling clearance items, so they will not be part of the main store experience. The company says that they have not had a store-wide sales event since 1991 in favor of predictable, balanced pricing that they feel creates loyalty and confidence with their customers. Clearly a very different approach when you compare it to competing stores like Kohl's, where Kohl's cash and numerous sales have become a central piece of their strategy. As a result of these loyal customers, sales figures have been mostly unchanged over the past 15 years or so, with the exception of 2020, of course, which I count as a positive, considering it is a mall-based department store that has been slowly closing locations. Finally, going back to the list and focusing more on their recent surge in value, I want to look at their earnings per share, one of the top ratios used to evaluate a company's performance and whether it is perceived as a wise investment. Lately, this ratio has been abnormally high, peaking at over $50 in 2022, which is higher than most companies out there. Earnings per share is calculated by dividing the company's earnings by the number of shares it has outstanding. So let me explain what is going on with these two parts of the equation. Earnings have been higher than ever, also peaking in 2022 at almost $900 million, but remaining high ever since. Part of this can be explained by strong logistics and inventory management. For example, I would guess that they are using their strong balance sheet to negotiate favorable terms with their suppliers. For anyone who follows finance or accounting, their current ratio is 2.8, meaning they can manage some short-term debt and are highly likely to pay their bills on time. Also, consider the fact that low debt means low interest expense, and owning most of their buildings means low rent expense. Those high earnings can also be attributed to a greater emphasis on higher margin private label brands, or as they call them, exclusive brands, currently accounting for 22 to 23% of their sales. Now, looking at the other part of the equation, outstanding shares, Dillard's has been consistently buying back their stock since the 1990s, and over the past 5 years, they have spent almost $1.5 billion on stock repurchases. In 2020, they bought it at an average price of $43 that has since exploded to more than 15 times higher, making that a really good time for them to buy it. And yet another factor making the stock more attractive is the fact that they have been distributing some of those earnings through special dividends each year that keep increasing in value. In November of 2025, they announced their largest dividend ever at $30 per share. To be clear, I want to qualify that I am not saying that Dillard's will be a good investment from this point, nor am I giving any kind of investment advice whatsoever. I'm simply trying to explain some of the reasons that investors have gravitated toward that stock in a big way over the past few years. To summarize, Dillard's has stood out from almost any other retailer. To me, the company that is most comparable to how they operate is not Macy's or Kohl's or anything like that. It is Tootsie Roll Industries. I made a video about them before, and if you watch it, I think you will see what I'm talking about. Longtime leaders, tight family control, leaning on tradition with low tolerance for risk. Dillard's might just be one of the most uniquely successful companies out there right now, and I think if nothing else, it stands out as a compelling case study filled with a lot of interesting elements. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts about Dillard's? Are you a customer of theirs? And if so, what would you say makes them stand out over Macy's or any of those others? Also, I have to ask, what do you see for the future? You have to imagine that something is eventually going to change with this incredibly consistent company, especially with a CEO that is 81 years old. And finally, do you agree with my reasons behind their success, or do you think something should be added or subtracted from the list? And any other thoughts you have about Dillard's, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.